With the rapid growth of online show analysis in recent years, driven largely by audiences shifting toward long-form content on YouTube, the intelligence scaling community got bombarded with newer people, and there was a sudden resurgence of surface-level and weak analysis on some characters. There is a bleak gap between people who do deep analysis and those who operate on the basic hinges of the narrative, which sometimes causes misunderstandings about certain characters. Today we'll cover one of those characters, one of the more popular faces of this type of media analysis. Kiyotaka Ayanokouji from the light novel Classroom of the Elite. With season 4 coming soon, which will cover year 2 of the light novel, we're going to shed some light on some of the novel showcase of year 1, which contains too many details that were cut out or outright changed in the anime adaptation, which is where the majority of the misconstructed understanding of Ayanokoji's intelligence stems from. To keep things simple, this analysis won't aim to put Ayanokoji at a certain level, nor will it use advanced terminology. Instead, it will be a simple recap of some of the few impressive moments of Ayanokoji throughout his story so far, from purely mental-based feats to full-fledged strategies and predictions, and mainly to show throughout a direct counter to arguably the biggest misconception about Ayanokoji, which is his lack of human understanding and social skills, something that exploring his feats across the first half of year 1 and one of the most major arcs in the story overall would help clear the truth about. One last spoiler warning before we begin, as we'll be directly talking about the source material of Classroom of the Elite. Many people know that Ayanokoji is special or superhuman, but very few realize in what ways, due to the misconstructed interpretations regarding his backstory. Volume 0 tells us a few things about how the White Room treated its students, and to put the record straight, there is no mention of supercomputers made for chess matches. It's one of those misconstructed interpretations. And another one, which is a common misunderstanding even among readers, is the level of the White Room that Ayanokoji attended. Ayanokoji was in the beta curriculum of the White Room, not the level 10 curriculum. The beta curriculum is more ruthless, but it's unclear how much harder it was than level 10, with level 6 being impossible for humans to endure. The White Room teaches multiple subjects including English, social studies, chemistry, Japanese language, Japanese history, mathematics, economics, political science, calligraphy, tea ceremony, and playing instruments like the violin or piano, as well as mental sports like chess. In the beta curriculum, the only passing grade was a perfect grade. The students are forced to study under these conditions while having to constantly train physically and get beat up by adults. Before he was a teenager, Ayanokoji was already the only student left in this generation and was practically taught everything the White Room could teach him. At some point, the White Room has to go under maintenance, or at least that is what Atsuomi tells his son, Kiyotaka. This allows Ayanokoji to apply to advanced nurturing high school and slip out of his house to attend the school, being projected for his years there outside his father's direct reach. On his first day, he already figured out the system of the school and how the teacher didn't explain anything about the point system to let them figure things out themselves, as such a prestigious school would expect the accompanying students to make some amount of effort to be well behaved naturally. His class takes a heavy fall after the first month, with a mock exam even showing that the students that failed to get the passing grade would have been expelled, which had unsurprisingly been a significant amount of students. This wouldn't be too bad if it wasn't for the fact that they lose even more class points and potentially helpful classmates because of this. Ayanokoji, allying with Kushida and Suzune, had managed to convince all the students to study in advance, persuading them to give it a chance instead of completely giving up on the idea. Then, after obtaining past exam papers, give it to them a few days before the actual exam, so that they'd get an extra push after they had already studied, succeeding in allowing everyone to pass. Except Sudo, whom they saved by buying the point he needed from Chabashira directly. Less than 3 months into NHS, Ayanokoji was able to do a lot of generally social tasks that might seem normal to any person, but keep in mind, Ayanokoji had seen nothing but the white walls of the White Room his whole life, and even in the small interlude where he was inactive, he could only interact with his father's butler. What comes next is arguably the trigger for the X arc in the story. Ryuuen Kakeru, another key player for year 1 of the novel, starts making his moves after taking control of his class. His perspective on this arc will matter for understanding Ayanokoji's decisions in this arc. The trigger for the X arc was a Suro incident, where Ryuuen attempted to completely thwart Class D's chances of ever making a comeback, while using them as an easy scapegoat to test the limits of the school's general security and conflict resolution, essentially telling 3 of his classmates to get into trouble with Suro Ken of Class D, forcing them to get into a fight with him, and twist the narrative to blame him, resulting in potential explosion for Sudo. Ayanokoji solved this by guiding Suzune subtly into abusing the exact deliberate loopholes in the school system to avoid having to confront the case by forcing Ryuen's classmates to drop it instead, by convincing them that they were ultimately going to lose due to the school security knowing the truth, but allowing the students to make any arguments they wanted first, tricking them into thinking that the case will end in mutual destruction in the best scenario. Ryuen deduces how his plan failed and essentially tells Suzune to watch her back and that the Class D will get their turn to be destroyed by him once it's done with Class A and B, Arisu and Honami's classes respectively. The next big special exam after this is the deserted island exam of Year 1. To understand the mechanics of this special exam, we first have to look at the baseline constraints. Each class is granted 300 S points at the start, which essentially acts as their survival budget for purchasing items from the manual. But keep in mind, while they can acquire bonus points by fulfilling specific conditions on the island, those points are only added after the test concludes, meaning they can't be used to bail them out during the actual exam. What drives the conflict in this arc is a leader system. Each class has to designate one student as a leader, and this role is crucial because only the leader can use a special keycard to occupy spots on the island. This setup is arguably a trap though, because it turns the exam into a game of information warfare. On the last day, classes can guess the identities of the rival leaders. If they guess correctly, they gain 50 points, but if they get it wrong, they take a 50-point penalty. The real danger here is that if a class has their leader guessed correctly by an enemy, they suffer a massive blow, losing 50 points and forfeiting all the bonus points they managed to accumulate during the test, essentially rendering their efforts meaningless. Finally, the school enforces strict penalties to test the students' limits. Simple things like polluting the area or missing roll call will chip away at their score. But a major setback like a student retiring due to injury will result in a heavy 30-point loss. And similar to previous arcs, violence or theft is strictly off the table. Attempting to physically sabotage another class will result in immediate failure, with the usual caveat that you need to have evidence or witnesses of such cases to apply that rule. Ryuen's strategy in this deserted island exam is arguably where we see the extent of his willingness to abuse the rules. He decides to spend all 300 class points within the first 2 days, essentially blowing their budget on leisure. Then, almost all his classmates return to the cruise ship. Keep in mind, since their points had already hit 0, they couldn't accumulate any more, nor could they go into negatives, so the penalty for trying was effectively nullified. With Class C seemingly out of the picture, the other classes lowered their guard. Ryuen sends Ibuki and Kanade to infiltrate Class D and B respectively, having them pretend they refuse to return to the cruise ship due to the fear of discrimination or punishment for disobeying Ryuen's orders. This was all an act, a part of Ryuen's plan to elicit sympathy and allow them to stay on the island despite their class having retired, making the other class believe they were harmless refugees. While infiltrating, Kanade and Ibuki were meant to secretly take pictures of the leader's keycards, providing the evidence to Ryuen later on, who had secretly remained on the island himself. Besides that, Ryuen had established a contract with Katsuragi, agreeing to transfer Class C's excess supplies to Class A upon leaving, allowing Class A to conserve their points, keeping hidden the fact that he had deduced that Yahiko is the leader of Class A for this exam. Logically speaking, this results in a complete victory for Ryuen. Class A suffers the most. Katsuragi believes he's voting correctly on Class D and B, whom Ryuen sent spies to. But since Ryuen votes for Class A correctly, they get the 50-point penalty and forfeit all bonus points gained during the test, which includes the 100 points they should have gotten from voting correctly on the other class leaders. Class B and Class D are left with 0 bonus points and a 50-point penalty each. Meanwhile, Class C gains 150 points total from correctly guessing all 3 leaders. Ryuen abused the loophole that points cannot drop below 0, ensuring Class C would finish in a strong position while leaving the other classes to suffer the consequences. But Ayanokoji countered the strategy completely. First, let's turn back time a bit to see how he dismantled Ryuen's setup piece by piece. Ayanokoji moved quickly through the island right when they disembarked, noticing that the ship turned around the island about 3 times before actually landing, and he noticed a particular spot inside a cave that seemed optimal to occupy. By the time he gets there alongside Sakura, he notices Katsuragi right outside the spot alongside Yahiko, holding the leader card very obviously in his hand, looking around to see if anyone is nearby. This action seemed oddly out of place, letting the key card be blatantly within view. So Ayanokoji deduced that Yahiko was the true leader, and that he rushed in to claim the place without bringing more students as divergences, leaving Katsuragi to try and rectify the mistake by drawing attention to himself. Back in their own base, they run into Ibuki. He notices something odd about Ibuki's behavior. It makes sense to be afraid of going back and dealing with the class bashing, but she had an odd cue about her way of speaking, specifically an odd habit of looking intensely into the eyes of the person she's speaking with when making claims. Later, when going on an investigation journey with Suzune, he finds that Honami's class, Class B, had better utilize their points, but also notices they have another student among their midst, Kanade, also from Class C. Seeing Kanade inside Class B's camp, he was 100% convinced that Ibuki was a spy, and Kanade was too, as it seemed too unlikely for the same story to happen twice and for the two students to go through the exact process with two separate classes. This allowed him to deduce that Ibuki is planning to leak their leader's identity, but she needs solid evidence for it, like a picture of their card. Ayanokoji immediately noticed Ibuki's nail had dirt deep inside them when they first met her, and there were unnatural patches of dirt near where she sat. Revisiting that exact location later, he found a transceiver hidden inside, which directly means that Ryuuen has to still be on the island, as retired students can use it, and it makes no sense for her to hide such a thing if she wasn't actively using it. To counter this, he waterlogged the camera that Ibuki had in her bag during a chaotic incident involving a stolen undergarment, something she herself set up, forcing Ibuki to retrieve the card physically instead of taking a picture. The next big event that happened is that Suzune secretly tells Ayanokoji she lost her card, and before they can even check their suspects, a fire starts at camp, and within the chaos, Ibuki is gone. Ayanokoji is the one who started the fire, purposely allowing Ibuki to escape, knowing that Suzune would still try to pursue her even in her bad conditions, spending days outside in the rain and mud while sick, which would implicitly guarantee her loss in their fight. This makes Suzune incapacitated, becoming an invalid leader due to health reasons. This in turn allows Ayanokoji to become the proper leader for the class instead at the last second, and without the other classes having time to learn of this in any way, completely invalidating Ryuen's strategy. Since Ryuen thinks Suzune is a leader based on Ibuki's intel, he guesses incorrectly, and because of the rules, one incorrect guess removes all your bonus points. Ayanokoji knows the A-class leader is Yahiko and the C-class leader is Ryuen as the only logical answer. So, if Ryuen's strategy went according to plan, the outcome should have been like this. But Ayanokoji's counter strategy allowed the points to change in the following way. Just with a few simple steps, Ayanokoji turned the game on its head, completely reversing the outcome of the battle in their favor and giving Class D a huge boost after their big disadvantage at the beginning of the year. The island exam is essentially the prologue of both the novel's true essence and the X arc itself. While Class D celebrated their unexpected victory, realized that the strategy used to win the island was too precise for someone like Suzune, he deduced the existence of a hidden mastermind within Class D, whom he dubbed X. This kicks off the X arc beginning with the Zodiac exam. This exam assigns students into groups based on the Chinese zodiac, with the simple goal of identifying the VIP student in each group. Ryuen, of course, immediately cracks the code of the exam, discovering that the school assigned VIPs based on the alphabetic order of the student's name, confirming his theory by collecting other VIPs he can verify from other classes through other contracts. While this is happening, Ayanokoji is preparing to deal with the inevitable issue of Ryuen chasing him. And for that, he needed not to simply avoid Ryuen or defeat him once, but defeat him completely, as Ryuen's personality was extremely persistent. Ayanokoji observes Kei Karuizawa. He notices a discrepancy in her behavior. Despite her usual loud leader-like persona, she becomes withdrawn and frustrated during the exam discussion. Ayanokoji deduces this behavior is a defensive mechanism. She is the VIP of the rabbit group and is terrified of being exposed. He also correctly deduces that her relationship with Hirata is a sham. She is a parasite, attaching herself to a strong host to hide a traumatic past. Ayanokoji decides he needs absolute control over Kei. He approaches Manabu, a girl from Class C who has a grudge against Kei, and lies to her that he saw Kei bullying one of Manabu's friends, tricking Manabu into cornering Kei in the ship's hull. He watches the bullying escalate to physical violence and internally compares this to the milligram experiment, observing how far people will go when given a justification. He waits until Kei is physically beaten and psychologically shattered, until her facade is completely destroyed. After the girls leave, he finally steps in, having recorded the violence to blackmail Manabe later. He offers Kei an ultimatum. He will be her new host, protecting her better than Hirata ever could, but she must serve him. He even threatened her with assault to test if she will betray him under extreme pressure. But she doesn't, and he's assured of her loyalty. Next, Ayanokoji needs to hide the fact that Kei is a VIP for their own group, and he comes up with a small strategy for this purpose. First, the SIM swap. Ayanokoji exchanges SIM cards with Kei. This means his physical phone now contains the VIP confirmation email. Then, the phone swap. He physically swaps his phone, which has Kei's SIM, with Yukimura, another classmate. This creates a shell game. If someone checks the phone, the VIP evidence is on Ayanokoji's device, but that device is held by Yukimura. It scrambles the flow of information. This small display saves his class from a needless loss, but also showcases his competence to Kei immediately, making sure she grow more accustomed to trusting his decisions in the future and not hesitate performing them. However, his long-term goal with Ryuuen is also helped by this, since he saved Kei from Manabe's bullying and was now blackmailing Manabe to use her as a spy in Class C. He knew that he was leaving a trail, and that eventually Ryuuen would find the spies in his own class, Manabe, and they would tell him, "We were blackmailed by someone protecting Karuizawa." Ayanokoji is banking on Ryuuen's seductive reasoning. Ryuuen will ask, who was the motive to protect Karuizawa? The answer will be obvious: Yousuke Hirata, her boyfriend. By manipulating Kei here, Ayanokoji is planting a bait that Ryuuen will eventually bite, creating a narrative where Hirata looks like the mastermind X, while Ayanokoji remains a background character. Ryuuen walks away from this exam with his theory confirmed. Horikita Suzune is a decoy. Her action in the Zodiac exam are far inferior to what happened in the island, so the real mastermind is indeed someone in the background. With the hunt of X underway, we move to the next special exam, the sports festival. Ryuuen strikes a deal with the Class C trader, Kushida, whom he previously teamed up with in the Zodiac exam, to obtain Class T's participation table. This allows Ryuuen to rig every single match, pitting his strongest athletes against Class T's weakest, intending to drag X into the light by crushing Suzune, who he currently believes is X's most important person. Ryuuen orders his classmates to physically collide with and injure Suzune, and when she directly confronts him about his extremely perfect performance against their class, he outsmarts and corners her with blackmail, demanding she kneel before him. Ayanokoji then, using the blackmail he gathered off Manabe, sends an audio recording from her, where Ryuuen ordered the assault directly to Ryuuen. Ryuuen drops and leaves Suzune alone, getting more interested in who sent this, and who the traitor is in his class, believing it all connects to X. Ayanokoji intentionally framed the situation to point toward Yousuke Hirata. Hirata is the leader of the class, Hirata is Kei's boyfriend, and Hirata acts as a messenger for the class strategy. To sell this lie further, Ayanokoji decides to reveal his physical stats. In the final event, the relay race, Ayanokoji subs in to run against the student council president, Manabu Horikita. For the first time, he stops holding back. He displays highly athletic level speed in front of the entire school, after being barely considered fit before. Ryuuen watches this and immediately drops any idea of Ayanokoji being connected directly to X, as X will never draw this much attention to himself, even through his pawns. Ryuuen narrows his list, but he's running in the complete opposite direction of the truth. With the next special exam, the paper shuffle, Kushida makes a bet with Horikita to expel her, planning to cheat using answers provided by Ryuuen. Ayanokoji deduces and counters this. First off, he knows for sure that Kushida isn't confident enough in her own academics to defeat Suzune, which naturally means she must have a sort of deal with Ryuuen, whom in turn showed interest in destroying Suzune since before even the island exam, and who Ayanokoji had already realized worked with Kushida before in previous special exams. Second off, by instructing Kei to pour juice on Kushida at the karaoke bar, he forces Kushida to wear her spare blazer instead, and due to Hirata's presence, Ayanokoji predicts Hirata would regulate the situation, allowing Kei, in turn, to offer to personally pick up Kushida's blazer and get it clean, and keep insisting until it's socially unacceptable for Kushida to refuse. Ayanokoji then contacts Ryuuen and reveals that Horikita had already submitted the test questions to the school early. This means the questions Kushida leaked to Ryuuen were useless. He forces Ryuuen into a dilemma: use the fake questions and fail the class, or betray Kushida to save the class. X asks for the questions that Ryuuen previously wanted. Ryuuen doesn't want to play by X's rules, but he doesn't want to owe him either, so he sends X the old questions he was going to submit as a sort of receipt to prove he's going to change them, effectively creating a third option for himself while utilizing the information X gave him, and lastly making sure Kushida remains a possible ally for the future. Logically speaking, Kushida would be furious at Ryuuen changing the questions without telling her, and she was, but as Ryuuen predicted, her blazer had the old questions he was going to submit, so him changing them pretty much saved her from explosion. He discussed with Kushida on how could this possibly happen, and she revealed the incident with Kei, which naturally led Kushida to the same conclusion that Ryuuen was slowly getting to. The only person with the capacity to set things up like this is someone extremely good at understanding social cues and interpersonal relationships between people, someone very smart and reliable for his class, which can only be concluded to be Hirata. The incident with the drink with Kei was the last piece of the puzzle for Ryuuen. It's extremely unlikely for things to pan out this way. We need the final stage. However, there's a big shift in Ryuen's approaches when he is 99% sure that Kei is connected to X and is perfect bait to bring him out. He decides that outsmarting X is useless and baiting him is their only option. But why? Well, in the same volume as a paper shuffle special exam, he spread rumors about the way Honami was obtaining points, accusing her of severe things through multiple letters, all signed by Ryuen's name. This tactic had multiple goals, but the main one was to disguise Ryuen's credibility. While Ryuen is the type of person to not try and prove his innocence in such scenarios, and in fact, Ryuen enjoyed watching the chaos and trying to deduce the message X was trying to tell him indirectly. He already sealed Ryuen's fate when it comes to the final confrontation. If Ryuen ever tries to expose Ayanokoji later, the school will dismiss it as another one of Ryuen's lies. Honami was never using illegal methods to gather points, and suspecting her to begin with and laying it out so confidently diminishes any little credibility Ryuen's words might have had for the student body and school in general. After many months of a hidden game of cat and mouse, Ryuen makes his final move. He investigates and identifies a traitor in his own class, Manabu, and forces her to reveal the truth about her betrayal and why she worked as a spy this whole time. X blackmailed her to protect Kei Karuizawa. Ryuen now is 100% sure that X is connected to Karuizawa, and that X is most definitely Hirata. No matter how you think about the situation, the information Ryuen has or could possibly obtain all lead into this conclusion. No place for mistakes. This is the breadcrumb Ayanokoji left all the way back in the Zodiac exam. Ryuen followed her straight to Kei. Then he kidnaps her, drags her to the rooftop in the dead of winter, and tortures her by pouring freezing cold water on her, demanding she give up X's identity. Ryuen's logic is simple. X is a mastermind who prioritizes anonymity above all else. He expects X to either sacrifice Kei to stay hidden or try to pull off some clever trick to save her from a distance. Either way, it shows Kei that her loyalty to X is ruthless. In the best scenario, he gets to know who X is directly, and in the worst scenarios, X just gives him an easier lead to prove his identity. But Ayanokoji does neither of what Ryuen is expecting and goes in directly alone. Ayanokoji also prepares his own backups before responding to the bait. He establishes an alibi by going to the mall with friends, so he can't be blamed for the initial kidnapping in any way. When near the rooftop, he positions the student council president, Manabu, and his teacher, Chabashira, as witnesses to ensure he cannot be expelled for what is about to happen. By confirming the timeline of events, as well as having authority figures themselves, the words will be taken for sure. Lastly, he knows Ryuen is going to torture Kei to get her to spill out his identity, and he knows based on everything so far that Ryuen isn't stupid enough to torture a student on camera. He anticipates that Ryuen has already spray painted the surveillance lenses to hide his crimes, which is only punishable by fine. Chabashira witnesses Ishizaki going up and down the stairs to get buckets of water multiple times before Ayanokoji even heads upstairs. If Ryuen or anyone in his group even thinks of arguing against him, Ayanokoji has multiple alibis and witnesses from many angles that make their cases essentially impossible to argue. Only then does he head in. Ayanokoji faces Ryuen, Albert, Ishizaki, and Ibuki 4 against 1. Despite them being delinquents and stronger than an average student, Ayanokoji's training in the White Room had him fight adults since he was a kid, and he knocks them out all except Ryuen. Ryuen believes he is invincible because he has no fear. He believes that pain and defeat mean nothing as long as he keeps getting back up, a monster who can hunt anyone. Ayanokoji shatters this worldview not because of fighting back, but by showing that this doesn't matter to him. As he beats Ryuen into the concrete, Ayanokoji displays no emotion emotion whatsoever. None of the enjoyment and joy he has with his friends, nor his resentment towards the tendencies he's learned from the White Room. He doesn't let Ryuuen see any of it. He views the fight as a mundane and soulless task. At that moment, Ryuuen realizes he is fighting something empty and inhumane. For the first time in his life, Ryuuen feels fear, due to nothing but the insurmountable gap between them. No matter how many times he gets up, the result will never change. Ryuuen will never defeat Ayanokoji with the way he is right now. After this defeat, Ryuuen steps down as a leader of Class C. He tries to drop out, but Ayanokoji helps his classmates, specifically Albert and Ishizaki, to keep him in the school, in the hopes that he can change his methods and dispel the weaknesses of his approaches, potentially becoming a great rival or useful ally one day, but ultimately not wasting his potential by dropping out. By the end of Volume 7, the X arc concludes with Ayanokoji holding all the cards. He has absolute control over Kei, he has neutralized the threat of Class C, and he has successfully hidden his true nature from the general student body. However, this all skips a few other concurrent plot points going on, mainly to focus on the battle between Ryuuen and Ayanokoji, and mind you, this is less than 1/4 of the novel. However, with this analysis, we have proven that Ayanokoji is smarter than you think.